Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am, as always, very happy to be with you to bring you another author interview. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I often do, to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are either watching or listening to this episode on. It really does help the algorithm. It helps get the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Also, if you want to help the podcast in another way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info and leave a tip or a donation. Again, that really helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. That's also a place where, if you choose, you can leave a question or a comment. I'm happy to engage with those, love answering questions. You can leave that there, and I'd be happy to answer a question or engage with a comment the next episode after receiving them. So again, that website is gsmcpodcast.info. It's scrolling on the bottom throughout the episode, and you see it in the video next to me. So happy almost Halloween. We are tomorrow is Halloween. This is Wednesday. I am a day late this week because yesterday was a mess. It was just one of those days where nothing quite went right. Not good. And you know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. It was not good. It's a very long, complicated story, but the weekend was great. The weekend, we had lunch on Sunday with a couple from my hometown, which was very fun. I hadn't seen them. We couldn't figure out when the last time we saw each other was. I don't know, 20 years maybe? I really don't know. I used to babysit their two younger kids a few times when they first moved to my hometown. And so I've known them for 35 years, I want to say, but maybe it hasn't been 20 years since I've seen them. Maybe it's been 10 to 20. I really don't know. None of us could remember the last time we'd seen each other, but it was awesome to get a little bit of home here in Portugal. And they'd visited Portugal about 15 years ago. Their son got married in September on Cyprus. And so they'd been exploring. They'd been on Cyprus. They'd gone to blanking Crete, I think. No, I'm blanking on where else they went. That's terrible. But they'd been traveling around, and then they didn't want to fly from Cyprus to Montana because it was going to take like 36 hours. So they decided, hey, let's go back to Portugal. We liked it when we were there. They got an Airbnb south of Lisbon, which is where they were flying out of. And then they looked at the map and noticed that it was not that far from us and said, do you want to have lunch? We said, yes, please. And it was a lovely, lovely day. And I was very happy to see them and catch up on their lives. And it was so funny because their daughter is a few years younger than I am. And I'd seen her on social media. So I had her of an appropriate age in my brain, but for some reason the younger two, the boys that I babysat, it was the two younger boys that I babysat a million years ago, and I don't know, I hadn't aged them up past about 13, so seeing them as grown men, 40, 30, late 30s, early 40s was just weird. So when we were looking at pictures, even though intellectually, I knew that was the case, but that's what happens when people and you don't see for a while. We all age, right? I'm sure people see me and think, oh, what on earth happened? But anyway, had a really, really good weekend with them and enjoyed it very much. But let's talk about the author interview that you are here for today. And again, sorry that it wasn't posted yesterday, but I'm very excited to post it today. And I have a returning author for this week's interview. That returning author is Nicole Maehrer. She was here not quite a year ago to talked about the first book in this series. That one is called Assistant to the Villain. This is book 2. We have Apprentice to the Villain. Let me go ahead and give you the description. In bold, it says, notice to staff. There has been a disturbing increase in cheeriness, sprightly behavior, and overall optimism of late. Please resume your former dark, ominous terrors at your earliest convenience. Management. Evie Sage has never been happier to be the assistant to the villain. Who would have thought that working for an outrageously handsome, bad for his brand, evil overlord would be so rewarding? Still, the business of being bad is demanding. The forces of good are annoyingly persistent, and said forbidding boss is someone somewhat out of evil office. But Rennedawn is in grave trouble, and all signs, Kingsley's included, point to catastrophe. Something peculiar is happening with the kingdom's magic, and it's made the villain's manor vulnerable to their enemies, including their nemesis, the king. So that is the description of Apprentice to the Villain. If you haven't read Assistant to the Villain or listened to it, they're both on audiobook. Definitely recommend doing that before you check out Apprentice to the Villain. These books they're romance, they're fantasy romance, or romantasy as they are sometimes called, and they are hilarious while also dealing with a lot of deeper issues. They're mainly told from the points of view of Evie and the villain, but there are a few secondary characters who get chapters as well. And we'll talk some about all of that in the interview, but these books are so much fun. They are hilarious because, as you heard, you've got that memo from management and you're dealing with a villain, but he's got an assistant, an incredibly cheery assistant who is there's just a lot of really fun juxtapositions in the stories. And I'm gonna stop blathering so that Hannah can tell you more about both Assistant to the Villain and Apprentice to the Villain. If you do want to go back and listen to that other interview, you can search through the playlist. I cannot remember the date. I did not look that up for you. I apologize. I usually do that and I forgot. But you can find that interview with Hannah and listen to that as well. But let's go ahead now with this interview with Hannah. Again, the book is Apprentice to the Villain. Hannah, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Thank you for coming. As you know, I tend to schedule really far out into the future. And so I don't always remember who's on my schedule when. And at the beginning of the month, when I started looking out, I'd forgotten when you were scheduled. And I was like, oh.
Oh, I know. I do too. I feel like I always think that things are further back than they are. And then I realize what the date is. And I'm like, oh my God.
I was very excited that to read the second book and to talk to you again. So thank you. We are going to talk about Apprentice to the Villain. Before we get there, though, if you wouldn't mind, for people who need a refresher or who haven't met you yet, just share a little bit about yourself.
Oh yeah. So my name is Hannah. I wrote a book called Assistant to the Villain and its sequel, Apprentice to the Villain. We just announced the third book, which is going to be Accomplice to the Villain. And I'm really excited. The whole of the stories are basically about a young woman named Evie Sage who works as an assistant to a villain. It's very office comedic fantasy. They're solving mysteries. They're trying to fight off a lot of romantic tension between the assistant and the villain. And all the while, the assistant is kind of coming into her own version of being evil or being villainous. So it's a really fun story to write. I got started doing it on TikTok. It came from a skit series that I started doing just for fun. And I fell so in love with the story that I had to get it to page. And now it's a book and now we're talking about it.
Yes, that is exciting. I mean, to have it just go from TikTok to actual hard physical copy books has to be amazing. Wild. So you gave a bit of an overview of the series. So we've got Evie and we've got the villain, who we do find out his name is Tristan. And they come together as, in a meet cute, but so just what always makes me laugh is that you said it's an office setting. They solve mysteries. So it's like this weird mashup of like The Office and Scooby-Doo and enemies to lovers, although we're not there yet, but there's the tension. When you sit down to write this series, does it just come to you, or do you have to kind of sit and think about like office scenarios? Because we have human resources, we have water cooler talk, but it's all with a slight twist. Is your brain just work like that?
Yeah, I think that my brain naturally brings a silly aspect to anything. So the more ridiculous the scenario, the better. And I also think that I have a brain that moves like quite fast. And I don't mean that in a I think really fast kind of way. I mean, it's like really busy up here. It's like a beehive. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to get it down or like get it out. And it's almost like I need to get it down on the page to like make room for more stuff up there. So it comes pretty naturally usually when I'm sitting down. Like every now and again, I'll get like just like regular writer's block, but I'm usually really excited to sit down and see like what comes out. Because to be honest, I don't always know what's gonna end up on the page until I'm done. And I'm like, oh my God, that's all right, let's do that. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it usually comes pretty naturally. It's funny because I never really worked in a professional office setting. But I think like this is my ode to what I would like an office experience to be like for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Because
comes pretty naturally most of the time.
it's fantasy, so you've got that sort of, fantasy medieval, vague historic period time
Yeah.
feeling, but where
Yeah.
you don't expect offices or some of the
Yeah.
other things that you reference. So I love that. But yeah, just you've got office pixies, you've got like just things. Actually, you know what? Your version of an office, I think, would be much more fun than
This is what I see. I'm like, people probably are like, yeah, this is not what offices are like at all. And I'm like, I know, but wouldn't it be fun if they were like this?
except maybe for the mayhem aspect of it. Like, what is it? Scatterday? What is?
Oh yeah, Saturday. That's why I always think I thought this was so funny. I was doing lives on TikTok and a lot of the readers and followers were like, "Can we be called the interns?" And I was like, "No, wait. I really like you guys. I don't know. The interns get treated so bad." But they were like, "No, we love it. We'll be Scatterday." I was like, "All right, whatever you want."
Okay, so the fact that they want to be called interns is hilarious to me, and yet the more I think about it, the more appropriate it seems because there is such a juxtaposition in these books between light and dark, funny and serious. And I mean, you've got villains and threats and this whole plot that involves the kingdom, but you've also got water cooler talk and cauldron brew and all of these things that happen in offices when there should not be an office setting in a fantasy environment. So at first I was like, no, 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 you don't want to be interns, and then I was like, yeah, maybe you do want to be interns. I'm not sure about that. But when we come back, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we will be talking more about those juxtapositions between light and dark, funny and serious. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with author Hannah Nicole Maehrer. As we get into segment 2, I do want to remind you very quickly one more time that you can leave a donation or a tip at gsmcpodcast.info. That's another way to support this podcast as well as the entire network. So if that is something that you would like to do, thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, thank you for all of the support that you give the podcast and the network and have given the podcast and network throughout its existence. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.info. Before the break, we were talking about the series as a whole and Apprentice to the Villain specifically, but also that Hannah's followers at one point indicated that they wanted to be interns. Maybe they are interns. I think they maybe have decided that collectively they are interns. I keep seeing behind me there There are pumpkins. I crocheted pumpkins and they're on the table behind me. I keep moving my head and I see them and then I try to move my head. So anyway, it's distracting me. I apologize if it's distracting you. Interns. I thought it was funny, but the more I think about it, the more appropriate it seems as well. So back to the conversation with Hannah. Well, and that's the crazy thing is because it's hilarious, but you've got like these really dark undertones, you know,
Yeah.
like there's Evie's little sister is 10 and she says something like, let's play throw the intern off the roof, you know?
Yeah. Like flying guard. Let's play flying guard. And he was
Yeah,
like,
flying guard.
what?
Yeah,
What did you see?
exactly.
And her sister's like, what to do? Like unfazed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it's a fun juxtaposition of dark and just very silly.
Yeah.
But so that for anyone who hasn't read the series, they're probably like, wait, what? But
I'm alarmed. Yeah, I feel
that
like that's very much my humor is like I've always had a habit of lightening even like really heavy things or really dark toned things. Because I find them more easy for my brain to process them or more palatable for me to process, emotionally speaking, when I can make it funny or silly, or just like lighten it up with like a joke or humor or something like that.
yeah. Yeah. So it's always a little tricky to talk about sequels because you don't want to give a lot away if people haven't read the first book, but give an overview of the second of Apprentice to the Villain.
So in the second book, Evie finds that her boss is out of, as this is how they put it in the description. I thought it was so funny. He's out of evil office at the moment for undisclosed reasons.
Oh, nice.
Yes, but she has to kind of take over a more villainous role while he's away to kind of keep the office running. And all the while, after that, they kind of discover this unforeseen prophecy that they need to fulfill. And it's kind of another mystery aspect in the second one as it was in the first one, except now they're trying to find something in this one. So they venture a little bit outside of the office. You kind of get more of the kingdom of Rennedawn. And you get more characters, and it's just more of everything from the first book. It's just expanding on everything from the first book, which is really fun.
Yeah. And for the most part, there are some chapters that are told from the points of view of secondary characters, and we can get to that. But for the most part, we get Evie and Tristan's points of view. Yeah. Talk a little bit about just, I mean, them as characters, but also kind of how they've evolved into this second book as characters.
Oh yeah, I feel like Evie in the first Evie's evolution as I've like watched her grow like from an author perspective has been like really gratifying because it's very cathartic. I think for someone who's like a recovering people pleaser, that's sort of Evie's whole mode in life is how can I make myself useful so that I can feel valuable? And if she's not doing that, then her self-worth kind of like dims a bit. So it's kind of been watching her go through this journey of working in the villain's office, and nobody's kind of got the pretense of being better than anybody else because everyone's like, we're all kind of doing bad things right now. So let's like acknowledge the elephant in the room. We're all kind of bad in one way or another, but we're all kind of good in one way or another. And I think that her evolution has kind of been, and her growth has been taking that and understanding that the world isn't painted in black and whites and there's so much gray area, and everything that she thinks is necessarily good isn't necessarily good. And that's kind of what she's grappling with in the second book. And as for the villain, he's kind of got the same journey as Evie. Like they're supposed to be two sides of the same coin, but they're opposites in the sense that he's kind of going through an evolution of it's okay to feel things, and feeling things isn't bad, and he's not unworthy of feeling good things. Because he's used to leaning into like the maniacal, the evil, the torture, like all of that stuff, because he's the villain. But now he's sort of like slowly but surely like allowing himself to feel more things that aren't necessarily like super comfortable to him. So that's the kind of both of them are going through like uncomfortable growth periods to get to a better version of themselves.
And I think that's another fun aspect of the series is that, you have these the darker elements and then the ridiculous elements, but which is life, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got, and I think sometimes when you're reading fantasy, you've got bad and you've got good, and the bad, you might get some backstory on the bad, but you don't always, you know, they're the bad guy. Whereas in
Yeah.
this book, everyone is a mixture of, they're all just different shades of gray, from
Yeah.
the secondary characters to the main characters, and they're all just trying to figure things out, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why I wrote it, because I've always been a sort of person. I'm like, I know it's so annoying when people are like, I'm very, like, I'm an empath, but I have since I was really little, like, felt very deeply for other people, to my detriment at times,
Mhm.
because it can be to a detriment for sure. But I think I've always tried to look, I'm a person, I'm a very optimistic person. I don't know how to function any other way. So I try to see the good in people. If there is good to be found, and I think there is good to be found in most people. It just depends on like what side we're acting on. And the other thing is people make mistakes, people make wrong choices. Like that's part of life. It's like a learning tool to become a better version of yourself with each pass. And it's not something to be afraid of. So I really like looking at characters that are very flawed in certain ways, because they're relatable, because we all are flawed. We're all very like gray area people. Like sometimes you're going to make a really, really good, morally righteous choice and feel really good about it. And sometimes you're going to make a choice that maybe isn't like the best choice that you could make, to be a good person. And that might be something that you take and learn from. But I really have always loved to look at characters like that. Because I find them very interesting. But I also think that we're all kind of one step away from being one of those characters, like one
Mhm.
bad day away from being the villain. And I also firmly believe that at one point in time, we've all been the villain in someone's story. And
Mhm.
that's just the way life goes. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you weren't like that person that was supposed to be in that person's life.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think both Evie and Tristan and some of the other characters as well are trying to figure out, or trying to navigate the world as the person they think the world sees them as. And
Yeah.
now they're trying to figure out who they actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You nailed it. Wow.
Thank you.
I
So
should be with you
yes.
when I'm writing.
Well, you did a good job portraying that.
Oh, thank you.
So I did mention that there are some chapters from the points of view of secondary characters. So when you sit down to write, you know, you've got the main story, through Evie and Tristan's eyes, but then how do you determine what chapters might need to be told from different points of view, and who
So
should tell them?
Yeah, so that came pretty naturally too the first time. There was actually more character POV chapters that I cut after the first draft, just because they didn't. I looked at the ones that were really intrinsic to the story and the ones that were just because I was like being self-serving, and I was like, I want to see what this character's thinking. But
Yeah.
it was a good muscle to flex even for those characters, because I might include some of those character POVs, or am including them in book 3. So I think when it comes to the overarching storylines and the arcs of the characters that I was looking at, I kind of knew that I wanted to have chapters in Becky's point of view. I knew in other characters' points of view that might be new that we're introducing in book 2. But I also knew that I wanted to venture outside of the office, but I didn't want to leave the office. So I kind of had it in mind where I was like, well, there's certain characters that why would they leave the office? It wouldn't make sense for them to leave the office. So let's flash back to the office and hone in on like outside of the villain and Evie, what is the office like, and what point of view are we seeing the office from like other people's perspectives? And that way we can still touch base with like our gang at the office, and we can still jump around to like where Evie and the villain are. So yeah, it came pretty easily, like who is thinking what or who is doing what, because it kind of offered, I really liked also like having a reflection of Evie and the villain's relationship from other people's points of view.
Mhm.
That was really fun for me because it felt like me coming in to be like, this is how I see you. Yeah, so it came pretty easily. There were actually more chapters that I like. There was a couple main playing chapters that I wrote in both Evie and the villain's point of view because I couldn't decide whose point of view I wanted it in. So I'd always send them both to my editor, and I'd be like, which one? Pick. And she'd be like, oh God, this is a hard choice. Don't do
Sophie's
this to
choice.
me. I know. I'm like, I'm gonna throw it at you so I don't have to make the decision.
Nice.
Um, So I have them all on a document if we ever have cause to use them. But yeah, so there was definitely more chapters that I struggled with who do I want like us to be with in this chapter, Evie or the villain, rather than the secondary characters were pretty easy to tee up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just a silly question. But
I
we
love
talked about
them.
Kingsley last time you were here. I love Kingsley. He's a little frog character. Um, so Kingsley has signs, and my brain, I'm way too literal sometimes for stuff like this because I want to know where the heck he keeps them.
Do you know
I
that
tried so hard to suspend disbelief, but I'm like, where is the sign coming from?
but you know what? You're not alone. I get this question all the time. I literally laughed so hard because I was at Books, Gowns, and Crowns last weekend, and this lovely reader came up and was like, "Can I film and ask you a question?" And I was like, "Absolutely. Nothing's off the table. I have no filter. Like, I don't know what too much information is. I'm just gonna say everything I'm thinking." So I'm like, "Go for it. What do you want to ask?" And she goes, "Where does Kingsley keep his signs?" And I just went, "You don't want to know."
We'll see. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I was kidding, obviously, but yeah, I explained this more in book 3, so I won't spoil it for
okay,
you.
I'm very excited.
But I
Then.
will say around the office, there's like little baskets full of the signs that the villain has like dispersed around the office, so they're pretty easy access for him. But outside of the office, this will be
Right.
in book 3.
Right.
It's only because I think I'm stressing everyone out. They're like, where are they?
It doesn't
Like,
like,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
it kind of makes me giggle a little bit because I love Kingsley and I love when he holds up his little pithy
Yeah.
sign, but then in the back of my brain, there's always like,
Like,
oh,
where did you get that? I think that when I was writing it, like in my head, I knew, and I think that I like didn't think anyone would think about it that hard. But it's been such a common question that I'm like, all right, I'm gonna explain it because I feel like I'm stressing everyone out, and that is not the goal. So let me just quick break
I mean,
this
it is fantasy, so there's some, like I said, you have to
sure.
suspend some disbelief, but
Yeah. No, I honestly too, like I was like, yeah, you're right. Where are they? So it will be explained in book 3. But in the office, they're pretty easy access for him as per the villain's request.
Sure. Okay, I admit I have spent probably more time than is necessary thinking about the antics of a fictional frog, but I love him. He is, I really do. I loved him in the first book. I love him as much or more in the second book, and I am sometimes way too literal when it comes to where on earth does he get these signs. And so I'm glad that there's an explanation and a little bit of an explanation here and more coming. Looking forward to more Kingsley. Speaking of more Kingsley, it's time for our second break of this episode. But when we come back, we will be talking a little bit more about Kingsley and some of going forward, book 3, etc. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my conversation with Hannah Nicole Maehrer. We were talking before the break about Kingsley, who is a frog character in the Apprentice to the Villain and Assistant to the Villain. We learn more about Kingsley in this book than we did in the first book, getting to know a little bit more of everyone's backstories, Kingsley included. We're going to talk a little bit more about him now, so let's go ahead and return to that conversation. And we've already started getting a little bit more of Kingsley's story, so I'm assuming we're gonna get more in book 3.
Yes, even more in book 3. I'm really, really excited. I actually wrote a chapter involving Kingsley. I don't want to say anything, but it was like a level of ridiculous that I have like yet to achieve in my writing, and I was so proud of it. I was like, this is insane. But I love it. I sent it to my mom because she likes to get like early chapters, and I was like, what do you think? And she was like, what is this?
What did I just read?
She was like, what happened? And I'm like, no, isn't it funny? And she's like, it is, but I wasn't expecting it at all. I was like, great, that was the goal. Fabulous. That's like just what I wanted to hear. So yeah, we're definitely getting more of Kingsley in book 3.
Love it.
Yeah.
What can you say about book 3?
I can say that it's just like book 2, it's more of everything. So we're getting more romance. We amped up the tension between Evie and the villain a lot. In the second book, it's being amped up even more in book 3, mostly too because they're kind of at a place right now where there's like a lot of angry tension between them in addition to like the like love tension. So there's going to be like lots of fun stuff with that because I love that kind of dynamic. It's almost like enemies in a way, but they're not really. So it's like a lot of fun to play with. And then we're getting more explanations on the magic system. We're going to kind of break down the world of Rennedawn more, find out more secrets about characters that we may not necessarily know secrets about. And we're also solving another mystery in book 3 as well, which is fun. Yeah.
And overarching arc, how many books do you have in mind for the series? Or
Oh, this is exciting because I had to keep this a secret. So I'm glad I announced this week because right now there are oh my God, good gravy. It is 6 a.m. 4 books plotted. And I was originally only saying 3 because I wasn't supposed to announce the 4th book yet. But I went over the summer to normally I write a synopsis and I send it over to my editor and we discuss it and then I go in to write. And I was sitting down to write the 3rd book synopsis, and originally it was only really planned for 3 books. I didn't really like have anything past that. But when I went to write the synopsis for the 3rd book, I was like, there's no way I can cram this all into 1 book. And I was getting stressed out because I knew where I needed to get like my end point. And I was like, there's no way I can get to that end point in this book without it feeling like incredibly rushed and not cohesive. So I sat down and I just wrote a 4th one just for fun, just to see what a 4th one would look like. So I wrote a 3rd book synopsis and a 4th one. I sent them over to my editor, and they were so excited because they're just like they're a great team of people, and they are really like down to go with the flow of creativity, and they love the story as much as I do. So they were like, oh my God, yes, of course, a 4th one, yay. And I was like, great. So we have 4 books going now, which is really exciting. I wrote both of the synopsises when I had COVID and a high fever. So when I reread them, I was like, good gravy.
literal fever dream.
I was like, whoa, did that come from my brain? Wow. I was like, this is a little scary, but okay. I think
Nice.
my editor too. She was like, what? I was like, isn't it fun?
And do you have a 4th A word for that 4th book?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I have a 4th. And I'm like already like the people guessing in the comments, like somebody was like, a fiance to the villain.
A
Like,
fiance.
we are manifesting, and I love that. I was like, this
because it is going up a level, because we started with apprentice and now she's accomplice. I mean, we started with assistant, apprentice, accomplice, and so what's above accomplice? We got to figure that out.
Who knows? Yeah, but I do have a title for book 4 already. And it's probably my favorite title out of all of them. So I'm really excited. I'm definitely gonna have trouble sitting on it for like a while because I'm like, I won't be able to announce it until next year, which is going to
got to be hard.
It's going to be a really big, I'm going to turn it in Tom Holland. I just know. And I say that as someone who loves Tom Holland. I'm like, I wouldn't mind being Tom Holland. But I definitely am going to out something at some point by accident.
Nice. Well, I mean, at least it's you and not, I mean, like, you have only yourself to blame at that point,
Yes,
which is,
it's true. It's true. No one's telling me to stop. I'm like, oh God.
So the concept started on TikTok, and Book Talk is a very interesting place. It can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of craziness, but Book Talk really likes their spice. So when we've got tension between Evie and Tristan, so it's not even closed door because there's tension. There's not anything. But if you were to, like, what is your spice level, comfort level for writing? Do you picture yourself writing something like? I know this is a weird question, but like,
no, it's not at all. Because I get asked this all the time. Like, because it's such a slow burn, it's such a mystery, I think, to a lot of readers. Like, where are we going? Are we going to get there? And I would say as of now, like, we'll definitely get to a point of without like in so many words, I love reading spice personally. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that I'm following like what the characters want to do and what feels right for the story. Like I'll never force anything if it doesn't feel right. So I think once I get to that point, I'll know for certain. But I do think like we're gearing up for more heat in future books for sure. Just because it's naturally progressing that way for me as I'm writing them. And I'm very comfortable writing spice or anything. I actually wrote my first spicy scene over the summer for a different story. It was for an anthology short story that I was working on. And I just like ran, and it was out of nowhere. I was like, oh my God, wait, is this a spicy scene? And then I did it. And I was on my friend's couch and I was like, I just wrote a spicy scene. And she was like, I'm so honored it was on my couch. I was like, we'll always remember this couch. This spot is where I did it. But yeah, it was fun. Like I had a great time. I love reading spice. I think it's so much fun. So I'm happy to go wherever the story takes us. So but yeah, I think we'll definitely gear up for more heat in the future. But it is slow burn, so who knows what.
Yeah. There's just such a wide range from closed door to like there's even a level under closed door that's like we sort of maybe hint at it to like
I think I'd probably fall somewhere in the middle of that scale.
full on.
Like I think that I think I would probably fall in the spice meter like somewhere in the middle, or if not towards like this way, but mostly I think in the middle.
Yeah.
For writing purposes. I'll read anything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would think I would think there's a difference between reading and writing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Writing, I would find myself maybe giggling at myself. Like,
oh yeah. It's
what are
like
you doing?
I like didn't occur to me that you like get editor notes for those scenes. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so I don't even know what to do with myself because I got editor notes back for that anthology story and there were like editor notes over that scene and they were all like really vague, but I was like, oh my God, wait, they read it. Like it didn't occur to me that somebody was going to read that. I was like a gremlin writing it and then somebody read it and I'm like, oh my God, why am I blushing?
Well, and your mom's gonna read it, there's that.
Sure. Oh yeah, but you know what? I think I'm lucky in that sense because I know a lot of people would be like embarrassed for their parents to read. I mean, I think for my dad, yes, absolutely, but my mom is like a huge 50 Shades of Grey fan,
Okay,
and she's like texting me while she reads, like, "This is torture. Like, when is it gonna happen?" And she's like texting me ideas, like they could do it here, and I'm like, "All right, Mom,
nice.
let me just do my thing, please." But she's so supportive, so I am really lucky.
Love it.
For sure.
I love it. So, you're working on what are you currently working on? Book 3 or?
Yeah, I'm working on Accomplice to the Villain right now and having like a really stupid good time.
Good. And you have the short story. Are there any other writings that you want people to know about?
Not in the immediate future, no. I definitely always have plans going. Like I was talking to my editor last night and we were just talking about like the future and I was like, I cannot stay in my own lane for 5 seconds because I'm plotting like 3 other books while I write one book. And that's always how it is. It's so annoying because I'm like, finish this one and then you can like focus on that one. But my brain's, oh, but wouldn't it be fun if this happened in this book? And I'm like, yes, but we're doing this one right now. Please let me do this one first. Yeah, so I think that I always have a million plans going. I'm excited to tell like every story that's in my brain. But right now I'm honed in and focused on the assistant and the villain universe.
Okay. Do you just like write everything down or do you just
Yeah.
let it all fly around your brain?
I do both because sometimes it feels like I have to write it down or my brain is going to implode because I'm like, there's too much going on. It just needs to be on paper so that I don't have to think about it anymore. But it's made my notes app look like a murder board. Like it's bonkers in there. Like I think like it would stress a type A person out so much because there's no rhyme or reason. It's just like random sentences, random thoughts, like, oh, this is gonna happen in this book that I haven't written and is a completely different story. And I'm like, it'll be like late at night and I'm writing stuff down and then in the morning I'm like, what did I mean by this? I don't even know what I was thinking, like totally sober, like not like no reason to forget, just that I was like late and I'm like,
Yeah.
let me write this down. Yeah, so I definitely have to write it down.
See, now I'm just picturing you like those memes on Facebook with the crazed look in your eyes and the board with all
Yes,
the
correct.
string and the pictures and the
That is literally exactly what like. I turn into a gremlin when I am writing. I like put a blanket over my head and I'm like, nobody look at me, nobody make eye contact, like only like no sudden movements.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vibe.
Whatever works though. I mean,
Honestly.
okay. Honestly, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. You know, the blanket, the coat. I don't know. Do what you got to do and make it work. But why am I, when she said gremlin, picturing the book goblin from TikTok? Maybe you've seen those TikTok skits on TikTok, obviously. But that's what I kept picturing. That's not what she's describing, but that's what popped immediately into my head. Neither here nor there. We are going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about what Hannah has been reading lately. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and sadly, the conclusion of my conversation with Hannah. Let's just jump right back into that conversation. And what have you been reading when when you take time to read just for you?
Oh, I try to read things that are like when I'm drafting, it's like a totally different vibe than when I'm not drafting. So I love reading fantasy in the fall. So I last year like struggled to do it just because it was my first time on deadline. So I was really just focused on writing the second book. But I think I found a way better balance this time. And I'm really fortunate that I'm writing full time now. So I'm not balancing. Last year I was balancing a second job and trying to write a book, and my brain was too busy. So I've been reading lots of different fantasy books. I finished Valley over the summer, which was the final installment of the Glacian trilogy, which is like Ledge, Chasm, and Valley by Stacey McEwen. I love that series. It's super fun. It's like a survivalist, almost enemies to lovers story where this girl is trapped on like this icy ledge. And there's a chasm separating it, so you can't get down. And she has like no idea what civilization is like because her village is basically like, you just have to survive. And there are these creatures that torture them. And long story short, she ends up needing to like run. She either decides to like become a soulless slave to these creatures, or they can hunt her down the mountain. So she runs down the mountain, and there's a half Glacian that wants to help her. And there's kind of an enemies to lovers romance between them. And I've been following the series for a couple of years, and I read the last one over the summer and was like hysterical. It was really bad. And now I'm reading the second book in the Book of Azrael series, or in the Gods and Monsters series. But Book of Azrael is the first book. And yeah, so I'm reading that one currently. And then I'm always reading a historical romance in the background. That's like my nighttime book before bed because they're just comfort reads. It's usually a reread. But those books like are really comfortable to me. So, and they're like no stress. I know it's gonna end in like a really happy way. So they're the books I go to when I'm like, I just need something comforting at the moment or something safe. So I'm constantly reading historical romances. I love that genre.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
said you read fantasy in the fall, so do you tend to be a mood reader or a seasonal reader?
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah. I mean, that's always subject to change. But I find that if I read, like if I'm on a beach vacation in the summer and I read a fantasy book, I am like not enjoying the beach vacation because I'm too honed in on the fantasy book. Like I think I need like a lighter, like contemporary or just something like romance, like just totally romance focused one and done book. So that I can actually like be with the fam. My mom is literally like, when you read a fantasy book, it's like you go away. And I'm like, I can't talk to anyone until it's done. Like, I can't do it. So I need like lighter books, I think, in the warmer weather. But then I'm in Pennsylvania. So come fall and winter, it's like dreary and dark. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready.
yeah.
I'm prepared to be locked in.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, brain just decided to
Oh,
take a
no, no worries.
small
It's early.
vacation. In terms of internet presence, if people want to find out more about you and the books, website, social media that you're active on, obviously TikTok is one of them.
Yes. Oh, yes. So I'm on Instagram and TikTok are like my primary forms of social media. I'm at Hannah Nicole May on both platforms. And then I am on YouTube. I don't post there a whole lot. I keep saying I want to post like the rest of the Assistant to the Villain skits. Some of them are up already. I will do it eventually. I need someone to tell me I have to do it so that my executive function can be like, yes, it's time. You have to do it right now. But yeah, those I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok at Hannah Nicole May.
I mean, I could tell you to do it, but I don't have any like executive authority over you.
No, but
So
I feel like
really
I would. No, I'm like, if you, yes, I might actually do it. I've said it on, I've said it here. So I'm like, okay, wait, people are gonna hear it's recorded. You have
right.
to do it now.
Going
Yeah.
out into the world.
Yes.
Hannah, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure you covered for the second book of the series or
No,
the
I
series
think
as a whole?
no, I think that I'm just like I'm really excited to continue writing in this universe. It's like my comfort place. It's the way I feel reading my comfort books is how I feel writing these books. So it's an absolute like privilege to be able to write a fourth one. I am so excited. I was so sad about the prospect of this being the last book. So I'm so happy that I get to continue. And yeah, this is my favorite place. So I'm glad that other people enjoy it as well and get to experience it with me. So it's exciting.
Yes. Do you,
Yeah.
we didn't ask, I didn't ask, do you have an estimate for the release date for book 3?
Yes. It's still new in my brain, but I believe it's August 5th of 2025. So almost like a just under a year from the last release because it came out on the 6th this past year. So you get it a year. Everyone's like, I have to wait a year, and I'm like, no, one day less.
Not quite.
One day
Technically,
less.
no. All
Technically,
right.
no.
Well, thank you so much. I know it's early, really early for you.
Oh,
So
no,
thank you for
being so flexible. And honestly, this was a great start to my day. I feel very energized now.
Oh, good. Good. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, it was so nice chatting with you again.
I do enjoy when Hannah comes to the podcast to talk to me. It's the second time and it was just as fun as the first one. So Hannah, thank you again for joining the podcast, returning to the podcast to talk to me about this time the Apprentice to the Villain. Like I said, if you are interested, if you haven't heard the first interview, haven't read the first book, you should definitely check that one out for Assistant to the Villain, now Apprentice to the Villain. These are seriously so much fun. I am enjoying the story. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm very excited that there will be 4 books because that means more time to give me some of the more of the backstory and develop some of the plots and the characters that are happening. Sometimes when you have a series, you think, do we really need more books? Can you not wrap it up in the next book? And I think she's right. I mean, she's the author and she knows where the book is going or the books are going and what she needs to tell. But I, as a reader, feel like it could wrap up in a 3rd book, but that you'd be cramming quite a bit into that 3rd book. So for me as a reader, I am happy that there will be a 4th book, and I really do like this world and these characters. So if you are a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of romance, if you're a fan of, what do they call it? It's the grumpy sunshine trope, but that's not what the trope is actually called. But you've got, the villain, and he's this grumpy character, and you've got Evie, who is this very positive But is she? I mean, yes, she is, but it doesn't mean, yeah, she's very, very sunny and positive and excited about life. But I don't know, you've got that trope happening. So if you're a fan of that, definitely. But also some of the secondary characters I am just as intrigued by. Not only Kingsley, I love Kingsley, but I am interested to learn a little bit more about some of the backstories. We've been getting some of those already, and there's a couple of new characters in this book. Just happy to be a part of this story and this world that Hannah has created. So definitely check out both of these books, and then we can all look forward to books 3 and 4, which of course are coming. Maybe not soon enough, but they are coming eventually. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope that you will join me for next week's episode. I have another returning author joining the podcast. I will be speaking with author Roger Leslie about his book, No Stranger Christmas. And like I said, Roger is returning to the podcast. He was on before to talk about a memoir. This is a novel that he has written, and it is the first of a couple of Christmas books that I will be speaking to the authors of in November. So tomorrow's Halloween, and then over the weekend I'll be talking about Christmas. But it's not quite Christmas time yet, but you got to start planning ahead, right? If you want to start reading for Christmas or buying books for people for Christmas. This is the story of a young man, a bit of a coming-of-age story, but he's really trying to figure a lot of things out. He is in 8th grade. He's at a turning point in a lot of ways. And so I'm looking forward to speaking with Roger about No Stranger Christmas, and I hope that you will join me for that episode as well. I hope you are having a great week, of course. And I hope that if you are a fan of this podcast, you will do me the favor of liking, following, subscribing on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help the algorithm, as I've said, get this podcast out, this podcast and episode and whatever out to more readers such as yourselves. Also, something that can really help the podcast is to leave a positive review. Thank you so much in advance for that. It really does help. It does not have to be anything complicated. One sentence is great, but any kind of positive review helps to get the podcast out to more readers. If you're on Facebook, yes, but if you're on social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and TikTok. I love hearing from you, interacting with you. So come find the podcast on social media, drop me a comment, question, etc. Again, I hope you're having a great week. Hope you have something fun planned for Halloween tomorrow. If you're a fan of Halloween, there is a parade in our town, so we may or may not be headed down for that. I don't think it starts until like 8 p.m., so it's an evening parade. We'll see. I will report back to you if we actually do go, but hope you have something fun planned if you are a fan of Halloween. But whatever's going on in your life and your week and your potential Halloween plans, I hope that you have plenty of time, as always, to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to